students came to me recently to ask if they could talk about their academic performance. They shared that they had really been struggling. They'd been in the hospital actually under medical care for depression and for concerns of anxiety. It's a story that's become quite familiar to me over the past decade as more and more of my students have expressed their concerns about the state of the world, the state of the nation, their own feelings of maybe worth or worthlessness, and a feeling that things have kind of fallen apart. Is it even worthwhile for them to come to college and pursue that, particularly with the debt that's associated and the economic situation that leads many students to struggle after college? Well, they're not wrong. Over the past decade, the statistics are damning. Clinical depression, loneliness, anxiety, those have all doubled, particularly for teenagers. It's hitting our youngest people worst of all. 40% say they're depressed. Hospital trips to the ER have quadrupled in that same time period for self-harm or attempted suicide. If you're under the age of 45, suicide has now become the third leading cause of death, and worldwide suicide has exploded over 60% over those past 40 years. In May of 2023, the U.S. Surgeon General declared that the nation was facing an epidemic of loneliness and isolation. Loneliness and isolation in a country as robust as ours supposedly is. Well, how did we come to this? What I want to do is invite you to come with me on a journey. We're going to investigate what has happened, and I'm going to invite you to see how you can play a critical role in helping us find a path forward for a common good for all. Our future is not hopeless. There's opportunity for each one of us to take a key role in building national success as we find the flourishing in our own life. Now, we are experiencing a lack of flourishing, and I think those are because the concepts and principles that lay within our national foundation, the elements, as it were, that caused our foundation to provide us an opportunity that wasn't seen anywhere on the planet at that point, well, they've been forgotten. In fact, over the past 4 or 5 decades, knowledge, understanding, and appreciation of our national history have fallen so much that we have lost comprehension of what even caused our founding and what were those key elements. Our challenge is that we have a spiritual issue and we're afraid to talk about it. Now, when I say a spiritual issue, what I'm talking about is that our crisis is not one that is solved by who we elect or by policies made in government, who we vote for, but they're internal, or as Lincoln said, mystical, that kind of combined within us as the element that kind of led us to create the type of society we had. We can't fully or accurately confront the challenges that are in the data unless we can see that our issue is interior. Now you might think, well, why? Well, because our system of a government of the people depends not on the force of government to make things happen. That would be the idea of having a king or an all-powerful government. We said we didn't want to do that. Instead, we constructed, as you know, a government of the people. So our ideas of government, our idea of our civic system, is one that is based on the liberty of each person to have the ability to abide with, to agree with the decisions that we've made collectively. In other words, we all stop at stop signs without a police officer around to make us. Now, the idea that our society is worthwhile, I want to stress this to you. I think you know this anyway, but in general terms, our society was a uniquely constructed society. When it first began in 1776, there was no other society like it. By the mid-20th century, we had become the envy of the world. By the 70s and 80s, upwards to 190 other nations had copied us in some sense. What were they copying? Our idea of a free press, our idea of an independent judiciary, the way we did our economics that allowed freedom for anyone to attempt to start any job that they wanted, the kind of land of opportunity, our education system, the fact that we paid our taxes, nobody had to come and make us pay our taxes. We did this collectively. Now, yes, it was imperfect. We were never the perfect place that we could wish to be. There were certainly always issues we could look at through our history where we dropped the ball, when we weren't as strong. But in general terms, by mid-century, it was clear that most people wanted to be like us. We were, in essence, a moral authority. Perhaps this is nowhere better seen than how we handled things after World War II, in which we became the first victorious nation after a major conflict who did not take anyone's land from them. Instead, We actually paid billions of dollars to rebuild land, including the land of our enemies. So what has happened to us? I think there are three major issues that have comprised or combined together that have led us into this situation. That again, I stress, it's a spiritual issue. Here's the first one. After the war, when we were at the height of our success, we became addicted to ease, luxury, consumerism, comfort. You kind of can see this in how by the 1990s, the hippies had become yuppies, and the success of economics kind of drove the country. And in fact, in the 90s also was the moment we decided we would try to banish pain, which merely has only led us to an opioid epidemic, where we somehow think pain is an evil. And of course, if you've ever tried to play a musical instrument, you know pain is a requisite for learning. And yet we thought somehow pain should not affect us because, well, we're so successful. We should have ease in the life that we want. One of my favorite founders, John Adams, he spoke to this. He said, when nations are corrupted and they grow generally vicious when they're intoxicated with wealth or power, ambition, avarice, and pleasure, they produce the appearance of a general delirium and an intoxication. And he further noted that delirium and intoxication destroys happiness. And further, this is the key part, is incompatible with that purity of heart, greatness of soul, which is necessary for a happy republic. In that same time period, we began to adopt an idea of individualism. Now you may think, wait, isn't America the land of rugged individualists? Well, technically, no. Yes, that's our PR, but that has not been our historical story. And again, one of the things I hope to show you through this whole series is what does our history teach us about our founding? Well, in this case, it doesn't teach us that we believe in rugged individualism, but instead we believe in community. You weren't going on the Oregon Trail alone. So in that idea, what we became is we began to believe that somehow all that mattered was myself, my individual setting. We were doing this. Researchers like Robert Putnam in the year 2000 were noting that this was leading us into disaster. When he wrote the book Bowling Alone, he noted even then that we were already having a decline in a focus on community. I will add, by the way, most people want partnership and friendship and relationship, but yet there was this thing happening to us that seemed to stress I and I alone are all that matter. Well, that, connected to the success, led to our third problem. And our third problem was we began to believe an illogical position, but highly held by many, many citizens, that the only thing that's true is what's true for me. That what I proclaim as truth is the only truth. Well, of course, just examining that in a general sense would clearly tell us that that's not correct. But when you tie those three things together, they produce for us really a valley of disaster where our moral decay led us to a place where the only way you could have a society was a society of might makes right. I was just over at the beach here in Florida for spring break, and the police were everywhere. When we asked, why are there so many policemen? There weren't actually that many college or high school students running around, not abnormally so. Or we were told by many people who were residents was that in the previous years of spring break, again, sort of over this past decade, what they'd experienced was a sense of lawlessness by these people, young people coming to their town to experience spring break. In other words, they were no longer willing to stop at a stop sign unless there was someone there to make them. Might makes right as an ideology is one that takes us all the way back to a king, in essence suggesting we don't have the moral fiber in which to follow the agreed upon rules that we've agreed to in a government of the people. Ben Franklin, who's not really a moralist, not certainly in the same vein of, say, spiritual depth one might think of with John Adams, he predicted this and he warned us of this. When the Constitution was being finalized and written in Philadelphia, he was there. He was the oldest statesperson. And in that moment, he gave one last speech in which he said, we need to pull together as a community, and he was warning the other members to make sure that they went back to their towns and successfully, told everybody what was positive about the Constitution. But he said, this government will last and be successful, he thought, for a long series of years. However, in the end, he said, it could end up in what he called despotism. Again, the idea of a strong government that kind of forces us to do things. And the reason why is, he said, when the people shall become so corrupted as to need despotic government, being incapable of any other. Again, our problems are of a spiritual nature. So who's at fault? Well, that's really the wrong question. No one's really at fault. We haven't elected the wrong person or made some specific decision that's been our disaster. Maybe better we could say we're all at fault. We've all collectively forgotten our past. We've all collectively drifted away from some of the core ethos and concepts within that foundation that I'm going to point out to you in some of the subsequent episodes of the series. But I do want to speak specifically to my people. I've been a pastor and a spiritual leader for over 30 years. I'm also a professor of history. There's kind of the tie-in together there. And I've noticed, and maybe you've noticed it also, if there's one group of people who seems to be angry or frustrated, it is my people. So particularly if you're a Christian who thinks someone or some group has altered or ruined the society, or if you're someone who thinks, well, actually, we were a Christian nation and we need to go back to that again. Christian nationalism is this phrase, although many won't say it that boldly. They'll say, no, I don't believe in Christian nationalism, but I believe still that basically Christianity should dominate everything. It's not quite a theocracy, but it's kind of getting close. Well, what I'm going to demonstrate to you is at no point was the United States designed to be a Christian nation. Instead, we could find Christianity as a core element within the foundation, but one that allowed for all people of all faiths and eventually no faith to participate and feel like they too could flourish. I hope also to demonstrate to you that if there's been a slide away against maybe someone to blame, perhaps it is the Christians. If you look back at the data in the 1950s, most research would show that in the 1950s, 90% of the citizens would claim to be religious, and most of those would claim to be Christian. If that's the case, and yet there's this move away that we've described in the data and some of the issues that we've talked about, it would stand to reason that it was Christians themselves who moved away. In the future episodes, we will examine together these issues. Look, I know no one listening to this, watching this, hates their neighbor. No one wants to be seen as a person of division, nor live through a time of division. In fact, that's one of the things my students often say to me, and their concern is like, oh my gosh, is the country falling apart? No one wants to be known as the angry person. Everybody watching this wants to personally flourish. You, your family, your loved ones, and those around you. Even perhaps the neighbor who you don't really get along with. You don't want harm for them. If you're a Christian, come with me. I plan to show you that the people of God have been here before. And we're going to examine their history and how that history informed our early colonial days and into our founding. And that by learning from both the mistakes and opportunities of those people when they were the minority culture, that there was a good road forward. And hang on, if you're not a Christian, don't turn me off. There's something here for you as well. I want you to see there's a good road forward, one that realizes that many of the things you would say you want for the society, things you champion about individual liberties and opportunities and freedoms and space for expression, those come from the Christian faith. That there's a net positive to Christianity that has informed our society and the society of the West for hundreds of years. In fact, so much so that because we've forgotten our history, ultimately, you don't even recognize them. But you need it in order to get to a place where there's a common good for all of us. Together, we can learn from our history keys that will help us on the pathway to a continued successful society, one that does have a common good. I'm Carl Kreisman. I'm a professor of history. I'm also a pastor. I hope you'll come with me on this journey as we try to find our best path forward to a common good. Look below for how you can follow along. And while you're there, drop me a comment or a question. I'll get back to you. I look forward to spending more time with you. See you next time.
Welcome to Unmoored, America adrift in historical forgetfulness and finding our way back. In this show, we dig into the societal upheavals in recent U.S. history that have left so many feeling lost, angry, or hopeless, and explore how our nation became so unmoored. At the heart of this upheaval is a major debate over how to build a society where everyone can thrive. Our host is history professor and theologian Carl Kreisman. Joining Carl is Matthew Porter, a writer, director, and creative executive.